Hello, I'm Jason Harrington, your air chemist over here at ResTech's Innovations Department, and today I want to show you how we assemble our VeriFlow flow controller. So to begin, we need to start with all the flow controller parts. As you can see in front of me, I have a fully disassembled flow controller, and in addition to that, I have a 9/16" wrench, a 3mm Allen wrench, and some Teflon tape. Now that we have all of our parts, we can begin assembly by installing the adjustment piston into the flow controller body. But before doing so, this is a good time to inspect the gaskets on the piston and check for any nicks or wearing. And this piston looks good, so we can just go ahead and install that. You want to insert it in the front face like so. And then we're going to use our 3mm Allen wrench to tighten that in, and you're going to have to turn counterclockwise to screw that in. And you'll keep screwing that in until it bottoms out. It can no longer go. Alright. Now that we have the adjustment piston installed, we can start by putting in the O-ring for the diaphragm. Put that in like so. We also can then put the diaphragm in. It's important to note that the diaphragm has two different sides, one with the ridges up and one with the ridges in like so. So you want to make sure when we put the diaphragm onto the VeriFlow controller body that the ridges are facing up and out like so. Now with that in place, we can put in the diaphragm plate on top like so, and then lastly we can put the face nut on. Now normally I've been doing this in the laboratory with access to a vise, so I can clamp the back end of the flow controller into a vise, and then I can tighten down on that face nut. In particular, we could use a torque wrench and a crow's foot, a 2-inch crow's foot, to torque this down to 90 inch-pounds. For the purposes of the video, obviously I can't do that, but you're going to have to realize 90 inch-pounds in a vise. Next, we're going to want to install the canister attachment fitting. This is a male NPT to female 1/4-inch compression, and we're going to want to make sure that we put that on the outside of the flow controller. But before doing so, it's important to note that we're going to have to wrap the NPT fitting with some Teflon tape. So I want to wrap this fitting with some Teflon tape, and while doing that, I want to talk to you about the purpose of Teflon tape. It's important to note that people often misunderstand that Teflon tape is used to create a leak-tight seal, when that in fact is not the case. Teflon tape is used for when you have a fitting like so, where you have two similar metals, in this case stainless steel going into stainless steel, and without the Teflon tape to act as a lubricant, what you can have is something called a process of galling, and that results in the friction between the two similar metals, which will then act kind of like a permanent weld. So if you were to not wrap this fitting in Teflon tape and put this into the VeriFlow flow controller, you stand a good chance that you may not get this back out. So that is the purpose for Teflon tape. Now while I was talking to you about this, I wrapped the fitting 3 times around with Teflon tape. So Teflon tape wrap fitting going on the outside of the flow controller body like so. You would tighten this down with a 9/16 wrench. And then we're done with that side. Now we can go ahead and install our critical orifice. Again, we're going to have to wrap this with Teflon tape as the stainless steel fitting. We don't want to have any galling, otherwise often referred to as cold welding. So again, we'll wrap this 3 times. Now that we got our critical orifice wrapped with Teflon tape, we can go ahead and install this onto the flow controller body on the inside, labeled in. We can tighten that down with our 9/16 inch wrench. And then if you have the luxury of having a torque wrench in your laboratory, you can go ahead and torque both the critical orifice fitting and the canister attachment fitting both down to 180 inch-pounds. Lastly, we can go ahead and install our vacuum gauge onto the flow controller. Again, we have an MPT fitting, and we're going to have to wrap this with Teflon tape 3 times. Alright. And then we will install that on the last port, which is a 1/8 inch MPT fitting labeled out. So we'll install the vacuum gauge on there. Tighten that down with the 9/16 inch wrench. Next, we can install our frit filter and washer on the inlet side. That is the side with the critical orifice. You want to be sure to install the washer first on top. Sometimes you gotta tap that to get that to seat, and then the frit filter on top of that. Last but not least, we can install our candy cane onto the flow controller. Like so. Again, we'll tighten that down with the 9/16 inch wrench. And there we go. We now have a fully assembled VeriFlow flow controller. So the last thing that we need to do is leak check this flow controller. So we're going to go ahead and leak check this assembled flow controller. In order to do so, I need a vacuum source. In addition, I'm going to need an extra 1/2 inch wrench. So for today, I'm going to use a 6-liter canister as my vacuum source, and then I got my 1/2 inch wrench. So first, we'll assemble the flow controller on top of this canister. Tighten that down with our 9/16 inch wrench. And then we're going to use the plug and plug the end of the candy cane. Tighten that up with our 1/2 inch and our 9/16 inch wrenches. Now, we have the fully assembled flow controller, and we're going to expose this to vacuum from our canister by opening the canister valve. And you should see we got about 30 inches of mercury. And if everything is assembled and leak tight, what we should be able to do is turn off the canister valve, thereby stopping the vacuum source. But the vacuum should remain constant within the flow controller. So much so that if the system is fully leak tight, and if we come out back in 24 hours, we shouldn't see more than 2 inches of vacuum dropped in that 24-hour period. If we see more than 2 inches dropped in the 24-hour period, we have a leak. Less than 2 inches, we're good to go. Leak tight system. So there you have it, folks. That's how we assemble our VeriFlow flow controllers and make sure that it's leak tight. This flow controller is ready to be deployed to the field for sampling. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at jason.harrington with an E at restech.com, and be sure to check us out at restech.com/air.